and be as efficient as possible. I'm going to first call this special council meeting, a workshop, Bristol Town Council workshop to order of February 24th. I'm going to take my camera as I normally do and point it towards our flag. If you could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chairman and members of the council, the first item on the agenda tonight is the workshop for the Rogers Free Library.
So I should probably set up some expectations for this evening. We do workshops periodically. The goal is to give us some runway and some comfortable time instead of trying to fit it into our normal agendas for regular council meetings. This gives us a little bit of extra time to kind of flush it out a little bit more, something that we can't normally do at a regular council meeting. I know that our report says that this was prepared by Nancy Kellner. I'm not sure who's actually doing the presenting for the library this evening. And I am looking right now, and Chris, please help me, is that I see obviously we have attendance from the library. I'm not particularly sure who is actually going to do the presentation this evening.
I do see Nancy is on the call. Melissa, is she going to?
Could you unmute Nancy, please? And sure, we can get some guidance from her if she's going to do the initial presentation or defer to someone else. Hi, Nancy.
Just here as an interested bystander, the new director, whose name is Ryan Brennan, who should also be on the call, is going to be doing the presentation.
I see. Thank you, Nancy. So, Chris, if you could move Ryan to a panelist. And I don't think any maybe you have. I have not met Ryan as of yet. So hello, Ryan.
Hi, how you doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you also. Why don't you just take a second, introduce yourself to everyone, including me, and a quick little background, and then we'll go right into the staffing study, please.
Sure. So yeah, I've met Steve, but it's my pleasure to meet all the council for the first time. So my previous stops, I was a library director in Dedham, Mass. Before that, I worked in Brookline, Massachusetts. And before that, I was in North Kingstown, Rhode Island, born and raised, went to Rhode Island College for undergrad and University of Rhode Island for grad school. And I'm just really excited to be in Bristol.
Outstanding. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So Ryan, let's get right into it. Let's this portion of our workshop was to talk about the staffing study that was done by the library. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Sure. So I do have a PowerPoint that I believe you all received. So I'm gonna, kind of crib from that in terms of my notes. There is a full report that Nancy put together, and there are, supporting documents in terms of all the statistics that are available through the Office of Library and Information Services through the state of Rhode Island. And there are links there if you ever want to follow up on any of that. So the staffing study was in response to last fiscal year's budget conversations regarding how many part-timers the library has, especially in comparison to the rest of the departments in the town of Bristol. So Nancy had put together this report in order to address that, making some comparisons to other East Bay libraries and some comparisons to libraries of a similar size. So that's really the information we wanted to present today. So when the library is fully staffed, we're at about 6 full-time employees and 21 part-timers. Of course, right now, we don't have our full slate of part-timers because of COVID, and we just don't require the level of staffing that we normally do. We're not open our typical 60 hours per week, have reduced evening hours, reduced weekend hours, all that sort of thing. So we've been able to kind of make do for now. But when we are at full staff, it's 6 full-timers and 21 part-timers. So we're open for 60 hours per week. It actually averages out to about 62, taking Sundays into account. And this has to do with Rhode Island state standards. Because of the size of our community, we're required to be open for at least 60 unique hours in order to get funding from the state grant aid, we call it. Unique hours just refers to if you have multiple locations, they have to be open at different times. Of course, we only have the one location, so all of our hours apply. Now, because we're a 3-floor building, we have service desks on the top floor in the reference department with our nonfiction and our meeting rooms, our main level with our circulation desk and our fiction and AV collections, and then of course the lower level with the children's department. The reason we have 2 people on each floor is for multiple reasons. One, of course, customer service. We want to be as efficient and helpful as possible to everybody that comes in, but also safety concerns. Just the layout of the building being 3 floors, requires us to have that many staff in order to, be there for backup if any kind of security issues might come up. The 2 kind of biggest full-time positions that we're missing right now in order to provide what I think is the best service possible is an adult services librarian. And what that position does is all of our public programming. So having, lecturers, movie nights, crafting programs, somebody to come in and talk about personal finance, any of those sorts of things, it typically falls under that role. And then they also do all the marketing and communications surrounding all of our programs. Of course, they're not a whole lot of use if people don't show up for them. So that's what that role encompasses. And then the other thing we're missing is a technology specialist. While we do have somebody that does work on technology right now, we have 43 computers. We're adding new items that we circulate all the time. And, we go beyond the scope of personal computers and that sort of thing in terms of what we work with. So it's, more than the position has the time constraints to handle. And then when we're at full staff, we're just under 15 full-time staff, combining all of our hours together. That's where we sit. So the part-time staff here, they're really kind of critical in any library, but for us, they give us a ton of flexibility in terms of staffing our night and weekend hours. We wouldn't be able to cover those without them. Covering for staff who are ill or on vacation, having only 6 full-timers, anytime that somebody gets sick or takes any extended period of time off, it leaves a big gap for us, and they're really there to fill that. And then the other big thing is they're flexible and working in multiple departments in the library. Most of our part-timers work, in the children's department, also at the circulation desk. So we're able to kind of move them around wherever we need them to work. And they also have a lot of unique expertise. We're really lucky with our part-time staff. We've got some retired librarians who have a lot of great experience, some staff that work at multiple libraries, and that really gives us a lot of insight on how other libraries are doing things and, helps us to improve. And then we just also have staff that are highly educated, doctorates, master's degrees in history and other areas of use for us. So that's been really great. Of course, you all know they don't receive benefits, so it's significantly cheaper to have a part-time staffer than a full-time staffer with benefits. And then just to kind of give you a comparison of where we're at with other nearby libraries or similar size libraries, heavy use of part-timers is pretty much industry-wide when it comes to libraries. Barrington's got 33. They even have a lot that work under 10 hours, which isn't something we typically have. We have a few, students that do that. There's 25 in Westerly and then 18 in Newport. And they all just have larger staffs than we do. So yeah, pretty common practice across libraries. And this is just a little bit about staff expenditures. This is included in here for a number of reasons. One, primary concern being retention, of course. Anytime, that's why there's a focus on East Bay libraries, but also when it comes to libraries that are of a similar size. I'm comparing us there. So we are, and you can see the footnote on the side, that's the link to all the data. And I should mention all of this data is from fiscal year 19. Fiscal year 20 data was just released for libraries by the state last week, but as you all know, we had, nearly a third of the year with COVID, so the data isn't quite as reflective of a typical year as fiscal year 19 was, so that's why we chose to use that. So Rogers Free, we're currently 7th out of the 9 East Bay libraries in staff expenditures per capita. We're last in terms of staff expenditures per full-time equivalent. So we spend the least amount of money per what would be a full-time staff member. We're towards the bottom for most positions when it comes to like our youth services librarian, our circulation supervisors, our technology specialist, our reference librarian. And then the rankings are pretty similar when we look at like-sized communities and not just ones that are nearby. So North Kingstown, pretty similar town in terms of population size, same thing with Lincoln. As far as the makeup, we have just over 4 degreed librarians, which is a little bit lower in comparison to North Kingstown, Barrington, and Newport and Lincoln. We do just meet the standards in terms of state grant and aid, although we are a little short in, we don't have full coverage of having a librarian in the building at all times. That's one area where we do fall a little bit short. And then our part-time staff, they help in every aspect of our operations. They come up with programming ideas, they do our cataloging to make our items discoverable. They assist our patrons with technology, which is a huge part of their job. And then, they also assist with your more general kind of reference questions at the desk, that sort of thing. And these are just some statistics for how the library's been used since from 2015 to 2019. And as you can see, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's gone up in every area. The only thing I would mention is the annual patron visits. I actually think that's a low estimate. That's going off of transaction data. So how many times a person went to the desk and checked an item out. And anybody who works in a library will tell you, we get a ton of patrons that don't even check out items. They'll come in, read the paper, read a magazine, attend a program, but never actually check out a book. So, we've recently installed a patron counter so we can get more accurate counts, but I think once we're back to normal operations, you'll actually see that go up. And then just some info about the library as community center. Of course, everybody thinks of the library as a place for books, which of course we are and always will be. But I think the big thing we've noticed with COVID is just how much people need the library just as a community center and as a place for them to get that social interaction they might not get otherwise. One of the biggest, I guess, I don't want to say complaints, but things that we've heard is from older patrons who are coming in to check out their books and really just kind of bemoaning the fact that they don't get that social experience that they're typically used to, either talking to the staff or talking to their friends in the library. And they really kind of have to be in and out right now. So we've really heard that and know that that's been a big impact on the community for sure. Of course, meeting space and study space is always big in libraries. Especially for students, obviously we're a college town, and also, local businesses and just having access to those resources, that are free. And the other thing we've done is we've expanded our Wi-Fi to include the parking lot. So if you lose your internet and we're closed, you can feel free to drive into our parking lot and use it. So that's been a big help. One of our big kind of major goals as a library is bridging that digital divide, helping people who, you have to apply for any job you want online now, regardless of whether it has any computer work. So just making sure we're filling those needs, where we're lacking. And then the other thing is we keep offering curbside pickup. So if, you're an older person or somebody with a pre-existing condition and you don't want to come into the library, but you still want to use our services, they can just drive up to the front door. We will come out and drop off their books. And then of course, we've continued to do our programming, whether it's our story times, our crafts. We have a great job series going on right now. That has continued through our social media and through our YouTube and website and things like that. And then just kind of our needs. I mentioned the 2 positions, the adult services librarian and the technology specialist position. As of right now, our circulation supervisor, our technology associate, and our youth outreach librarian, they're all kind of splitting up the the duties of an adult services librarian between the three of them on top of doing their regular job. And I think I mentioned before that with the technology specialist position, we just have so much tech and we want to grow it even further, but just don't have the staffing right now to really sustain that. And then my last slide is just some other resources. So the link that I sent out has all of the data back to 2000 from the Office of Library and Information Services. Also gives you kind of the Rhode Island laws and regulations regarding libraries, and what we require to be certified, what our requirements are for grant and aid. And then there's also just a link to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which gives you data for kind of nationwide to give you a better look at that. So that's what I have in terms of presenting. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have from the documents that you received last week. More than happy to do so.
Thank you, Ryan. So I'm going to open it right up to the council and ask, is there any questions from the council so far? And I saw Tony, you unmuted, so I'm assuming that was you.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. First of all, welcome aboard, Ryan.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Well, and I see that we both go to the same barber, so that's a good thing.
Right.
With that being said, you've been with us for about what, 3 months now, Ryan?
Yes. Yep. Started November 30th.
Okay, and I know you read very nicely from the prepared power presentation there. However, from your perspective, I know it's an unfair question because you've only been for 3 months with us, but what is your take thus far from the operation of the library?
So I think we're doing a lot of good things. Obviously, it's a strange time to come in. You know, being in COVID, we're not operating as we normally would. The one thing I have noticed, though, is that there are a number of responsibilities that are kind of disparate among different staff members that would really be better if there was somebody to kind of take ownership of it. You know, when everybody is working on everything, then you know, things can fall through the cracks. So I think we really need to have a big push towards more of our marketing and our communication in terms of actually telling people what we're doing. I think that's a big thing that we're missing right now. So I do think we are lacking some full-time positions that would really be helpful for us. But at the same time, you know, we need to maintain that flexibility in order to make sure we're able to stay open as much as we need to and kind of provide the service that we need to.
Thank you.
Council? Mary?
Okay, hi, welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
So, what was I gonna say? Oh, so in your, you referenced that you'd like to see your tech expanded. I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about what is your vision and what are some of the things you'd like to see happen?
Sure. Yeah. So there are a few things kind of off the top of my head that I would like to see. I would like to see for us to circulate, you know, I mentioned the Wi-Fi in the parking lot. I'd like to see us circulate wireless hotspots. I think that would be big in terms of, you know, people who lack internet at home and really kind of need that in order to, you know, apply for jobs or whatever it is. Same thing with kind of general tech that we all use on a day-to-day basis that people may not be able to afford, whether it's laptops, whether it's e-readers and that sort of thing. I'd also like to see us expand a little bit in the library in terms of, you know, libraries are really kind of trending towards, instead of just being a repository for information, also being a place for people to create. So I would love to see us have 3D printers. I would love to see us have, you know, computers with software that you might not be able to afford. So I'm thinking like Adobe Creative Cloud off the top of my head, like Photoshop and that sort of thing. So I'd really like to see that expanded. So those are kind of the big areas off the top of my head. And I'm just thinking of from a maintenance perspective when it comes to staffing. You know, it's one thing to circulate books, but if you circulate laptops, those obviously require maintenance when you receive them back before you send them out, you know, worrying about people's data and all that sort of thing. So it's obviously a lot more intensive than, you know, just circulating your typical library items.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue. So I think there's a lot of good stuff. Do you know if there's anything out there on the marketplace for low cost internet for adults or for families? I mean, I know that in some of the communities, the urban communities at least, kids who have free and reduced lunch can get like a $10 a month deal with Cox. But I know some seniors that are not able to afford Wi-Fi and they're really at a disadvantage. Even for example, right now with the COVID, signing up for COVID shots, that's
Right.
been, I helped a friend of mine. She doesn't have a smartphone or a computer because of the cost of the Wi-Fi, basically.
Right. Yeah, so the first thing I would say is to plug the library there. Have anybody call the library if they need to sign up for a COVID shot. Our staff are happy to help with that. But yeah, there's actually a company based out of Johnston called Mobile Beacon. They work exclusively with libraries and nonprofits, and we're able to kind of get the devices essentially for free. I think they're like $10 or $15 each. And then it's only $10 per month for us to pay for the internet. So we're able to kind of circulate it on that level. I'd have to talk to the company in particular to see if they expand that to low-income families or seniors or anything like that. But they are Rhode Island based, and they've done a lot of great work. So that's definitely something I'd be interested in looking into to see if they go beyond just helping institutions.
I think that'd be wonderful if you're able to do that and let people know if they were able to get. I mean, there's no question that COVID has sort of really highlighted the digital divide across the country, and certainly within the state and within communities. So there's no question about that. In terms of, even I see in my after school programs that are virtual, kids who have better Wi-Fi than others, and they're in and out, and and I'm sure this goes on during the school day as well. The other question I had, and I've been a longtime advocate trying to get some of the salary increases for the library. Who were the two lower communities when you said we were seventh in some of those categories? Who were below us on the east side?
Warren, typically at the bottom. And for that one where we were seventh, I want to say it's Portsmouth, but I'd have to pull up the data to be 100% sure.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting because I believe Portsmouth has had for years like 3D printers and other things. I remember going there to check them out before for work-related reasons, but I went there, because I wanted to just check on the size of the communities. Like, I mean, we're significantly larger than Warren, for example. And so I think that is something, an important piece to keep in mind as well. Thank you so much. That's all my questions at the moment.
Okay.
Aaron.
Thanks, Ryan. This is Aaron Lay for joining us today. You guys are going to be a really important part of the recovery and everything for a lot of families as we move forward past this pandemic. I guess one of my questions is, it kind of relates a little bit more to kind of what you're seeing right now in terms of use of technology. I know that, and I've heard and I've watched television morning talk shows about this and things like that, that just COVID-19 has just accelerated our use of just about everything. So if we were trending in one direction with something, COVID-19 really accelerated it. And I think the evidence right now is us being here on Zoom. We had started doing a lot of this, but then when COVID came, we really kind of put both of our feet in with it. Now, with that, I imagine also that as the magnitude of what we're doing is changing a little bit in terms of how we're going about doing things, like using more technology and everything like that, I get the sense that there's probably going to be a lot more wear and tear on technology than there ever has been before, right? People are using it more. Zoom is somewhat of a powerful system, right? I imagine that it causes a little bit of wear and tear on your computer. You have a lot of things that are running at the same time and everything. Are you just getting the sense that a lot of the equipment that's currently being used right now is being used more than it's ever before? The reason why I ask is that because I imagine that the foot traffic is a little bit less right now than we expect it's going to be maybe in the spring or in the summer. When that happens, you're going to see even a greater use of that technology. and maybe more need for replacement and software upgrades and things like that. I don't know if you would care to talk about any of that kind of stuff at all.
Sure. One thing I'll mention is our ebook usage has seen an increase of about 12 to 15% year over year for the state ebook consortium, which is to be expected. Obviously, less people can come into the building, so they've really kind of latched onto that and are using it frequently. I think one of our jobs in terms of the technology we circulate is to circulate items that I guess require less maintenance or things that we're able to kind of do on a mass scale that don't require, like, for example, your traditional Windows PC. If you need to update it, you have to go to every PC and update the PC. Whereas my vision, I guess, if we were to circulate laptops to the community, would be something like a Chromebook, where we can use the Google admin panel and reset them, remotely without having to do any of that additional labor, where they're locked down, we're able to reset them easily. We don't really have to worry about the wear and tear you're talking about, like getting a virus or something like that. But that way we're able to deploy them and still kind of maintain them. The same thing with hotspots. Luckily, they're easy enough to lock, reset, and everything from your account control panel. I've done it in other libraries I've worked in. So I think that's really part of our job is, while we do need more help with maintaining some of these things, we still want to make sure we keep the maintenance as low as possible while still kind of providing as much as we can.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we're kind of moving away from that model of having that hardware in the library. A person comes in to use that hardware. Instead, it's more distributing kind of the hardware so that they can kind of use it on their own, or bring in their hardware, in their own personal hardware, into the library, setting up, having a Zoom meeting in one of the meeting rooms or something like that, or doing a presentation for a job or something like that, and then moving out. So
yeah, that's absolutely true. We're all moving more towards mobile devices, so we're trying to reflect that as best we can. Same thing with, we all save everything in the cloud, whether we use Google Drive or Microsoft Teams or anything like that. It's less about saving items to your hard drive and more about having your own accounts and being able to kind of take that wherever you go.
Okay. Tim?
Thanks, Chairman. Brian, nice to meet you. Glad you're on
You too.
board. I was just wondering if you could go over, I think last year there was a lot of questions around that state regulation in regards to the, had to do with like Rhode Island grant and aid or something like that, where the library had to maintain a certain amount of hours. Could you talk a little bit about that and just remind us, because I think it was a subject that came up on budget, but just remind us all about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so grant and aid, in Rhode Island state statute, there is what they call maintenance of effort, which essentially means having to remain at least level funded from year to year in order to qualify for grant and aid. And the amount of grant and aid you get is supposed to be 25% of 2 fiscal years ago, 25% of your town appropriation. And this hasn't recovered since the recession back in 2009. It's still at like 21.73% of our budget is added on from the state. But so that's what maintenance of effort is. And then there's several kind of minimum standards that we're required to maintain in order to get grant and aid. One of those is being open for a minimum of 60 hours per week. That's the big one. Having full access and borrowing privileges to anybody who lives in the state of Rhode Island. So not just Bristolians, as being part of the consortium and getting the money, whether they live in Barrington or Portsmouth or wherever they live, being free and open to the public. Making sure we have trained staff to help them with all of our resources. There are some additional requirements, like the director has to have an MLIS, the youth services librarian has to have one. For a library our size, we're supposed to have a half-time young adult librarian and then a degreed reference librarian. So there are some things that go along with who's employed at the library. And then there's other things like having a current strategic plan and having a disaster preparedness plan, and then just different personnel policies and procedures. But the main one, as it affects the town council, is being open those 60 hours per week and maintaining at least level funding every year.
And is that in addition to Sunday hours, or is that Sunday hours would be additional? Right?
Yeah, Sunday hours are additional. So we're open about 62 hours per week if you average them out to include the Sundays, because we're only open on Sundays like during the school year, not typically during the summer.
And are you guys tracking like the usage of the day, like how much traffic you're getting from day to day or week to month? I know with COVID and everything, it's an exception. I'm thinking about back to normal times.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, and we absolutely will be. So the Ocean State Library's got a grant to install cameras and people counters in every library in the state. So we actually just had ours installed maybe a couple weeks ago at the front door, and then we're not allowing access in the back door right now, just to make sure we have the right amount of people in the building. But we'll install that there as well, and we'll be able to get stats down to the hour, so we can see when we're busiest. And if there's anywhere we can move hours around, any of that sort of thing, we'll be able to get pretty accurate data.
Great. And my final question is, like, the adult services position that you're having, are you doing any training within your group to elevate any of the part-timers or positions to make sure we, looking within first, because they know the library, they know the community, rather than just looking out, and bringing new people in.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. In a lot, some of it isn't really to do with a lack of expertise in the building as much as it is a lack of time. They just have other responsibilities that they need to tend to. But yeah, I'm big into professional development in general. Ocean State Libraries does a great job of doing a lot of training. I've encouraged all of them to do that. And I hope to do some professional development days, once we're away from COVID and we can actually all sit in the same room. I'm hoping to do more of that as well. But they've been doing online webinars and conferences and that sort of thing. And we also have staff here who are just great at training their colleagues in terms of anytime something new is introduced, making sure that everybody feels like they're up to speed. But I think that's good practice in general anyways, is to try to promote from within and build the staff here and kind of build, not only, build that institutional knowledge, I guess. Having somebody who's been here for 10 years, of course, has just a ton of benefits. So I think that makes sense.
Absolutely. And then I just had a question in regards to IT and tech, in regards to going over to that tech specialist position.
Mhm.
You're not considering a contractor at all for this position? Is it really, the job description is a full-time with benefits and everything else? Just
Yeah.
because going through some of the items that they were going to hit, and I thought it seemed to sound like more of a contract role, full-time, like a contract to full-time. But I don't know. I was just wondering if you were considering that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons we considered a full-timer as opposed to contracting it out. One has to do with Ocean State Libraries. They actually manage our network when it comes to all of our patron data, a lot to do with our internet and that sort of thing. And they're very particular and keep it very locked down in terms of who can access, essentially our network cabinet when it comes to that sort of thing. The other big reason is that the idea going forward also is not just to service PCs, I guess. We have public computing PCs now and staff PCs, but we want to go beyond that, whether we're circulating iPads and laptops or having 3D printers. So we want to make sure we have a staff member in here who can get familiar with each of these things and be able to do that, as opposed to, I guess, your typical contract IT company, which would, work in an office environment, servicing PCs or a server or something like that. So those are kind of the two big things there. And then the third thing is just being able to help and expand our public technology programming, whether that's doing drop-ins, so you come in with your device, you don't know how to use it, being able to do more of that, being able to do more classes, being able to kind of expand the public information sphere, I guess, of technology as opposed to just the maintenance piece.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Tony.
Tony, go ahead.
Question, Ryan. This study that was provided to us, was this shared by this? Did you share this with the staff?
That's actually a question for Nancy. I have not shared it with the staff. I don't know. I believe she completed it in September. So I don't know if it's been shared widely with the rest of the staff or not.
Okay. Is Nancy on?
She was. And she is.
Hi.
Yes, Nancy. Tony Texera. Nancy, was this study shared by the staff? Did you share with the staff, with the entire staff there at the library, so that they're aware of that a study had been done and what the areas of concern were?
Yes, the original study was absolutely shared with the staff. Some of the things Ryan said tonight, he added on for his presentation for you. But the original study that Betty Brito sent you in September was shared with the staff. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mary.
Just have one other a couple of quick questions. First, I just want to say that I don't think you could function without the part-time staff that you had. It's just the nature of your business, and it's also the nature of many, even nonprofit and educational type programs, just because you have so many hours, and there's certain things that high school kids could do, and you want to have those, and but it's also just the cost of benefits is so high that it would be prohibitive. But in terms of your discussion, when you're talking about the tech specialist and the different kinds of things, and maybe too early to have had this, but if you had any conversations that you plan to with, say, some of the school districts that have done a lot of remote, I mean, some more than others, some have been in person, some have done remote, in terms of, what is the best bang for your buck in terms of like going into, like, there's certain benefits to Chromebooks, right? You don't get the viruses. They don't last a very long time. I don't know that they were ever made to be doing like a whole year of virtual learning, for example. But there's sort of, so there's like you have to keep buying new on a very more regular basis. And the same thing with laptops. I know that iPads and so forth. I know there's a number of adult ed programs, for example, and it may be Providence Public Library, maybe one of them, that actually give out and loan out for adult ed students iPads. And that's something I also do adult ed in my real life and as one of my jobs. And I don't really, we've always gone with computers just because we wanted to be able to use Microsoft Office. So if you're doing job training, you're going to think that, people are going to say, do you know Excel? Do you know Word? As opposed to Google Docs and Sheets and so forth. So it's always been a dilemma. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that probably have had a fair amount of experience now after COVID, and especially that is like the best way to be able to figure out what works well. And I'm just suggesting that, and maybe you already have done that, but I think it's a great idea to have those devices available.
Yeah, I mean, mostly I'm speaking from experience at previous libraries, but obviously this was all pre-COVID, so I'm definitely very interested to see what has kind of stood up to extended use as opposed to, I guess, your more typical setting where somebody would check out a Chromebook for a week and then return it when they need to use it every day, whether it's for Zoom meetings or online learning consistently. So, I mean, that's definitely something that I'm going to speak to, former colleagues with to see what their experiences have been, and then definitely speak to the school district, because I don't think anybody's harder on a device than a middle school kid. So I think we can gain a lot of knowledge from that.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Okay, well, my colleagues did an excellent job asking all of my questions. Thank you. I was going to focus on technology, but I believe we've already done that quite well. The goal for this evening, I believe, was achieved. It was to hear from the library, particularly from you, Ryan, to understand this staffing study, why it was done and opportunities that we need to discuss, I would say, as part of our budget, which this was absolutely perfect timing. Gives us some time to digest it, to consider it. And as budgets comes around, it's next month. My goodness, it's almost next month now. So timing was perfect. So I think we've asked all of our questions. I'd like to ask you, Ryan, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to?
I don't think so. No, I think I was able to kind of, express everything that was in the study, and there were some great questions. I just want to say that I'm always available, via email or phone if the council ever has any additional questions or just wants any information on the library. I'm always happy to answer those.
You're a good reference then.
Yeah.
It's too easy. Sorry, everybody. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, and I don't want to stop the conversation if there is, it sounds like we've covered it, and our next steps will be, honestly, is to take all of this in and digest it. And I think it was clearly presented. Thank you, Ryan. And you answered our questions, I believe, to our satisfaction. So again, thank you. And thank you to library staff, including Nancy and many, many others who put the hard work in to put this together for the town. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It
Ryan.
was good information. Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
So we don't need a motion or on this item because it was a workshop. We're taking no action here at the moment. Obviously, there'll be some future conversations on it. So Madam Clerk, we will go to our next agenda item.
Mr. Chairman and members of the council, the next item on the agenda is the workshop presented by the Bristol Animal Shelter.
So I think the same general goals apply here again. Was just to restate, an opportunity to have some less time constricted conversation with literally that. And as you can tell from the way that we're conducting this meeting, it's a little bit more casual than a regular council meeting, which I think sometimes promotes some more comfortable conversation. So what I'm going to ask is, I'm not sure who is going to be presenting for the Friends of the Animal Shelter.
We should have,
And-
Chairman, we should have Jennifer Bristol that's presenting.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Chris, if you could promote Jennifer to a panelist. There she is right there.
And I believe Elizabeth Brito as well. And there she is. Yeah, here we go.
Yes, they are both there. Excellent. Welcome to both of you. I think you are both unmuted at this point. Yes, you are. Excellent.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jennifer. Welcome, Betty.
Yeah,
The floor is yours.
Betty? Do we have Betty on here?
I can see, we can see her name is there. She just unmuted.
Sorry, I am
Not at all.
off the video too. Okay.
So I'm going to start with, I'm going to share my screen and work this, if Chris can set me up to share.
You are good to go.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to start by saying, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Friends of the Animal Shelter, we really are appreciative of the council's time. And as Chairman Colero said, we're very hopeful that this will allow an opportunity for discussion, for good dialogue about the shelter. So early in 2020, the Friends of the Bristol Animal Shelter found themselves in a place they'd never thought they would be. The future of the Bristol Animal Shelter as a Bristol entity seemed in jeopardy. Concerned about the underutilization of the shelter and instances of overtime attributed to animal control officers, town officials entered into discussions with other animal facilities relative to collaboration of resources. There was even a hint of a lease of the Bristol shelter to another entity. While town officials believed they were working in the best interest of taxpayers, those who had raised significant funds to build the new shelter and those who had dedicated inestimable volunteer hours over 36 years were appalled and disheartened. In short, the Friends of the Bristol Animal Shelter were blindsided. Instead of giving up, the board of directors initiated months of research and planning designed to rectify the ills of the Bristol shelter. We're here this evening to share the findings and to present some ideas that will set a new vision for our animal shelter. We offer our vision and a proposal for beginning this work.
Thank you, Betty. My name is Jennifer Bristol. I think most of you know me, but if you don't, I live in Bristol and was previously a director at Mount Hope Farm and am doing a lot of consulting work right now for nonprofits. And in that regard, I was retained by the Friends to support their efforts in not developing a plan as much as fine-tuning it and adding some firmer goals and framework around the work they were already doing so that we could lay out in paper and within a framework how we propose to increase utilization of the shelter. The plan has many activities, it has goals, and many of the activities, as I said, were in place already up until about a short time ago. How that process and that moving forward broke down is part of the discussion, but it shouldn't be the focus because I really feel I'm kind of a glass half full kind of girl, and we're here and we're glad to be here and we want to move this ahead. So I'd like to walk us through what the Friends of the Bristol Animal Shelter are proposing and start with what we think was the original plan and how it should have worked. The fundamental purpose of the shelter is clear. Protect animals, care for them, help the sick, feed the hungry, find them homes. This includes housing for stray animals, impounded animals, sick and injured animals, care, food and shelter, veterinary care, socialization, which is critical, and of course, the ultimate goal, adoption. And that includes administration of that, interviews, making sure you got the right people with the right pet, and the fees that are associated. The facility itself is state of the art. And in this process, I have spoken to many other welfare organizations, rescues, shelters, people in the community, veterinarians, people that have visited the shelter, and everyone agrees, everyone, that the town of Bristol has one of the best, if not the best, facilities in the state. So kudos to everybody for that. The town of Bristol's relationship with the shelter, to the shelter, is of course to maintain the buildings and the grounds, to provide security where needed, to monitor it, the expenses, the budget, the utilization of the shelter itself, and to set policies when needed, how it's managed, how it's being used, what is the right function. The work of the shelter would not succeed and couldn't be done without the leadership and expertise of our Bristol Police Department Animal Control Office. I've spoken with Chief Lynch, Captain Burke, Animal Control Office staff, and my parents used to have a saying about police and enforcement individuals, and all of these people meet that, and that strikes me as an example of the best in blue, is what that used to be called in my house. The role of the Animal Control Office: monitor, enforce, and serve. They respond to calls, they enforce policy, state law, and they're also on hand to educate and engage the public. And that is more than a full-time job. Imagine adding to that keeping the doors open for potential adopters, keeping runs and cages clean, managing the needs of sick and injured animals, and anyone would run out of time. And that is why the Friends Group is and has always been a critical resource to the work of the Bristol Animal Shelter. The Friends Group has been in place for almost 3 decades. Long before the state-of-the-art building came to be, there was a core group of volunteers out there doing the heavy lifting and supporting better lives for animals in Bristol. Through the years, the Friends Group has fundraised to support the added costs of veterinary care needed for no-kill shelter. inspired, trained, and worked to develop a coordinated and dedicated cadre of volunteers, created and hosted educational programs, including offering animal welfare training in our public schools. As Betty expressed so clearly, the Friends are part of the roots of the shelter. And yet in the short time since this beautiful facility has been built, there's been a decrease in volunteers, a decrease in animal intakes, a decrease in adoptions, and a subtle but pervasively unwelcoming environment at the shelter. And we hear this from volunteers as well, that has eroded the good intent of everyone involved. You know, this isn't pointing a finger at anybody. This is just human nature. But the Friends group is here and ready and willing to do all the things that they have been doing for all these years and more. They want to support the veterinary care with fundraising, grant writing, pro bono services, networking. They want to bring in an even bigger group of volunteers through outreach, offer training, recognition, and they want to offer more programs and events, including bringing back interstate rescue, offering educational programs, everything from Ask an Expert to dog and cat nutrition, in-school education, and then utilizing that beautiful education room that's part of the facility, rental, event management, and meetings. It's really a lot of opportunity here. But if we have so much opportunity, you know, the question is, what isn't working? And this was a lot of the work that I did. And it became pretty clear what the problems are. We know the shelter's underutilized. The good news is that there seems to be a lack of homeless animals in Bristol. So kudos to everybody. But that's today. That's right now. And if we think about the world that we're in, this COVID world, this really confused, complicated world we're in, what might happen to so many of those animals who were adopted by folks who found themselves working from home? They thought it was a great time to train a puppy or train a cat. And all of a sudden now they have to go back to work. It's not working out so well. What about the animals of people who get sick or people who die? In an open survey that the Friends currently have running and open to the public to participate in, a majority of the people who have completed that survey indicated a high degree of concern about how post-COVID might impact animals' needs for homes. So I think this, and because it's the right thing to do, means we could be better prepared. Why are we only rescuing animals in Bristol when there's space and the means to help animals from outside the footprint? Imagine the excitement and the visibility for the town of a transport truck loaded with adoptable animals pulling up to that shelter. If there are a few that need to stay a few nights, the perfect family isn't there yet, that's fine. We've got the space, right? That's what we're talking about. We want to fill that space. We can do it. Good communication is key to every organization. And I've had wonderful conversations with everybody involved. I mean, it's been a great process for me. The interesting thing whenever I do something like that is that I tend to find that everybody has really good intent and everyone feels they have the right ideas. They have the answers. And at the same time, in this case, there's been a minimal investment of all of these people sitting around a table and hashing out what could be done better, what's not working, how they can help each other in their work. And so, you know, issues come up and it results in somewhat of a he said, she said conversation that's really unproductive. And again, I think we can do better here. We've got really smart, dedicated people, everyone involved. Collaboration, this is key, number 3. You know, I came to this town to support another organization with very similar problems. So, you know, nobody's guilty here. Nobody should feel overly bad. These things come up when you have an organization with a lot of people that love it and want to help. So I'm not unfamiliar with building collaboration and what needs to happen. And my limited experience, but some experience, is that this could all be achieved if we had a plan and a framework of how that plan is going to work in place. And that's what really needs to happen here. So the Friends are proposing this. For utilization, let's expand the access policies. Let's figure out a way to get more animals in that beautiful space. Consider surrendering animals. There's a policy now that we can't, and maybe legally it wouldn't be able to happen, but it's worth considering, can we do this? We may have to consider it post-COVID. We'd like to promote the continuation of temporary housing for pets in crisis, which has always happened at the shelter. People experience domestic violence, illness, homelessness. They need a place for their pet to go. They don't want to give their pet up, but they need to house it. There is funding out there for this. We can do this. And then, of course, interstate rescue. The Friends group is certified to do interstate rescue. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be doing that if there's space available. To increase the capacity needed to support that, and you will need more capacity so that you don't wear down the animal control office or the town resources. What we're proposing is that we focus, the Friends focus on building more partnerships with other people who can support the efforts or have mutual skin in the game. And these could include other rescue organizations, work study programs right at Roger Williams, other colleges, other municipal shelters that may need assistance, whether it's space or otherwise, and other organizations or efforts that may find a way to work with us and support both sides of the coin. What's really key for me, and always is in my work, but I feel in this community, and the reason I live here, what I love about it is the engagement of the town of Bristol and the people that live here. So, let's keep the community engaged. This is the community that donated to and that voted for this shelter. They wanted it here. They wanted it to be the best. So let's get them engaged and involved in creative ways and impactful ways that improve the shelter and their own lives. Let's really make that volunteer program more robust. Let's offer more educational programs. Right now, it may have to be virtual, but down the road, it could be in person. We could have some great events, great education, great opportunity, and then special projects. Let's get our kids involved. We have active scout groups out there. We have 4-H clubs. Those young people would love to get involved. And what better ways to teach leadership and social responsibility than in a shelter like the one we have right here in town? It's all possible. It's a lot of work, no doubt. But it can only happen if we can address the communication and the collaboration part of the equation. So great news. We're already here at the very top of the pile, right? We're here at the workshop, which we wanted to have and which we so appreciate that you offered to us. It's wonderful. And we need to get together. It's not enough for the Friends to get a consultant and talk to everybody and then create a plan. And it's not enough for each group to have their own plan and run with it. It's got to be done together. So this is step one. And it's really not time to hand it off to an outside agency or a partner, because we really haven't given it our best shot, all of us. This workshop is critical. It's step one. And the draft documents shared with the council by the Friends, their strategic plan, and their draft memorandum of understanding are all a part of that. It's a starting point for everybody. But no good plan is worth its salt without mutual understanding and agreement. And the handshake, and there were a few handshakes that happened in the history of this, it just didn't work here, right? So we're proposing we get it on paper and have that paper be a living, breathing document, something that can be shifted and modified as we succeed, or if issues arise that we need to adjust our course a little bit. We need to set goals and measures to hold ourselves accountable. And we all know that there is a bottom line to every town building and budget. We get it. But it's not the job of the Friends to raise money for the town. That is not the purpose of the Friends of the Bristol Animal Shelter. However, the Friends could support the health and care of more animals in that shelter. More animals mean more adoptions. And the result could and would likely impact the bottom line. So I'm here representing the Friends tonight. But, you know, as I said, I'm a resident. And I am a person who has experienced real time the wonderful things that happen when the shelter and the Friends of the Bristol Animal Shelter come together. And he's sitting at my feet right now. And it's an amazing process. We need to support that. And I really think we can get back to it, but we need to start on common ground. So what are we asking for, really, tonight? The Friends have invested a lot of time and energy and heart into this shelter. There's no doubt, I mean, I think we all feel that it was poorly conceived and communicated to have this consideration of an outside party to do many of the things that the Friends have been doing all along. I mean, it really hurt. It hurt because it was a lack of acknowledgement and recognition. And we want to do more. We want to do better than we were doing. We were doing a lot, but we want to do more. So what do we need from you? We need your support in allowing us to take the time and gather the resources that we need to accomplish our objectives. Can't happen overnight, but it can happen. And the opportunity to make it happen needs an equitable time frame, and then the framework to begin the work. And that framework, along with the shared responsibility it takes to get these sort of things done, involves this agreement of everyone involved, the stakeholders, agreement on the plan, agreement on the process, and how we're going to get it done. You know, everyone tries to do their very best, and that's why we're all on this call tonight. And I understand that many people felt a bigger vision was needed. It's not working, so let's create a bigger vision. Or maybe for some, it's the bottom line, after all. Or maybe what was needed and what the Friends took on as their responsibility was the time needed to identify what the issues are, what the opportunities are, and how they can effectively achieve that and do it in a way that's to everyone's benefit. That's collaboration, and that's community. I think the Friends deserve the opportunity to be a part of that shelter for all these reasons, and most especially because they were there when the idea for it came about. From conception to raising it up from the dirt that it's standing on now. And that deserves our thanks and our respect. So no presentation on the Bristol Animal Shelter would be complete without some adorable pet photographs. So I'm going to shamelessly pull out the stops and just have you take a look at this. Because these are just one handful, one sprinkling of the animals that have benefited from the shelter that you and this community have influenced. And everyone involved has had a part in it, from the animal control officers who bring the animal in, they take the call, they go and get it. The veterinarian who might mend the broken bones, the volunteers who mend the broken spirits, the families that see something in that dog or that cat that tells them, that's mine, and they take it home. And then the community who recognized something about themselves when they voted for this, that they care about the bigger picture, and that a healthy whole community is a community that cares for its own, all creatures, great and small. All of this could have been managed better, but we don't need to look back. We need to look forward. And we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Nothing is so broken that it can't be fixed. It's all there. It could all be better. It could all be amazing. And the Friends are here and ready to take a breath and start again. They're asking you, the town council, the community, the leaders who care about what happens in Bristol, to support a fresh start and work with us to make it happen for everyone, but especially for the animals that are going to benefit from that effort. I want to thank you for listening. I'm really passionate about this. It's been a pleasure to work on this project. I've gotten to know so many wonderful people working to support this town. And I hope that this opportunity can happen, because I think this could be an example that could be duplicated and admired well beyond Bristol. There's an opportunity here to do something really big, and this is the place that can do it. So I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and open this up to questions from the council or anyone else that wants to ask. And I'm going to ask that Betty, and I believe John Lannon is on the line as well, another board member of the Friends, to answer those questions as the Friends themselves. And I thank you very much for this opportunity tonight.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I'm going to open it up to the council first, of course. So to my colleagues, what questions do you have? Mary?
I don't really have a lot of questions. I think it was a really good presentation. I think, Jennifer, you were very, very positive, and I really loved what you had to say. One of the things that has disturbed me for many years, and I've brought it up almost every budget hearing, is the surrendered animals. It bothers me so much that, you know, people that can no longer keep their animals have very little choice but to turn them out on the streets. And that is something that, you know, there's these sort of policies, and everyone over the years has answers of, well, we can't really do this because then everybody would be surrendering their animals, and we can't really do that, and that's not what the role of a shelter is. And yet I've seen the impact of that with cat colonies and everything else over the years, when animals have just been discarded. Maybe they were, you know, students who had them, and they go home in the summer, and now there's some poor animal that's out in the streets. And so I think that is really, really, really important. And I also think, and I think it needs to be a clear and consistent policy, because right now, as I understand it, it sort of depends on the circumstances. And that's not really the way to go, I don't think, in general. So I mean, there's a lot I could say about all this. I definitely think that the Friends have done a great deal. And it's definitely, you know, we have nothing to lose to give this another chance, as you said, and a shot to, you know, do everything that we're hoping to do. And I think one of the things that you see, you know, we also had at one point when we had the, I think it was the old shelter, I might be forgetting this, but I believe there was a policy that we were not going to import animals from other kill shelters. And, you know, that I really think has changed. I mean, just the advent of Facebook, for example, I mean, all the cute little pictures that you see of dogs and cats doing adorable things. And also many of the groomers, even the groomers in town, animal groomers, they're bringing animals up from kill shelters. I mean, it's become like a much more common practice, I believe. I don't know if that's the right phrasing. And I think that they're often animals that, you know, are adopted just by going through and looking online. You know, you can go on and look for particular cats that are in a regional area. So I do think that there's, you know, there's a lot of potential for people that want to adopt a particular kind of pet. You know, it doesn't mean that we're just going to be importing animals and having them sit there, but there's something like there's people looking for animals, and I think often they're going outside of Bristol because we don't have a selection, and that we need to, you know, if I told you what I was looking for a pet, you know, you might be able to find that easier than I could find it, and help with that. So, and I also think some of your community service, like one of the things, my cat of like almost 20 years, you know, as most cats do, they die from kidney failure. And, you know, like you wonder, what is the best kind of food to serve them? You know, like, I mean, not everyone can afford it, and not everyone, I mean, is it raw? Well, I'm not going to do raw food, but, you know, what would be the best kind you know, those pre-cooked kind or the specialty kind? I mean, what is it that we're looking for? And to try to understand that just online. I mean, I did a lot of research on it. You know, I think all those things would be very helpful, but people have to, one, you have to have it, and two, you have to be able to let people know about it. And there's definitely enough people that could, you know, a lot of people find things on Facebook and around town Bristol. So I'm definitely in support of giving the friends, like giving this a shot and seeing how it goes. And hopefully everybody will work well together and will, you know, meet all of our goals that we all had high hopes for.
Thanks,
That's
Mary.
my thoughts.
you, Mary.
Anyway.
Colleagues? Nothing else at the moment? Okay. Tim, go ahead.
I've had the luxury of being liaison and attending some of the meetings and working with the Fine group. And I want to thank you for all your hard work that you put into this, this animal shelter. Jennifer, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you talked about time. You guys needed time to give a chance to increase utilization and maybe change the policies that you're talking about. Could you take me down a little bit of that timeline? What are we looking at? 2 years, a year, half a year?
You know, I think, and I'm going to respond a little bit, and then I'm going to ask Betty to weigh in as well. But thank you, Tim. And I do want to thank you, Tim, for all your time. And it's been a pleasure. So I will add a quick note to Mary's that as a farmer on the surrendered animal issue, I'm one of those people that gets the chicken dumped over the fence or the goat left in the yard. So it's a big issue. And I think we can work around it, but there are some legalities. So, but I think we could do that. You know, like I said in the presentation, you know, these things take time. I've worked in a lot of organizations where the change is needed, and, you know, it doesn't happen in a year. And I think 2 years is a fair and equitable window to say, you know, to establish what we want to do, what our goals are, with periodic checks. You know, you want to review any plan. Any good plan needs to be reviewed. And one of the items in the strategic plan was for the Friends to have scheduled retreats and meetings where they review and make sure they're meeting their marks. You know, what's a red light, what's not working, what's a yellow light, taking a little time, but it's doing, and what's doing really well. So I think you have to give it 2 years, more than anything, because of where we find ourselves in the world right now. This is an unprecedented time. So to get things moving, to get big events happening, or to get really in-person programs is going to be challenging. All that said, I think what Mary alluded to, the nutrition, in our survey that's open right now, Mary, that's the #1 choice, cat and dog nutrition. People want to learn about it. So I think we can do these programs that have a, you know, donation-based fee, offer them to the public. Again, you know, bringing some donations in to support this veterinary care for animals and adoptions, but also offer our community something amazing. And we're also online now, that this is the time to do it. People are really taking the time to re-engage with their home, and part of their home is their pets. So I think the shelter ties that all together in a neat little bow. But I'm going to let Betty address that time issue.
Yeah, I think the 2 years is a fair estimate. As you all know, it's going to take us a little while to get going, and a lot of what's in our strategic plan we can't enact, you know, in a COVID environment. But I think even you really need to take a look at the MOU. We all need to take a look at the MOU, because the memorandum of understanding is where we're going to develop the communication. And I think that has to happen first. So that has to be an agreement between the town and the police department and the Friends. It clearly, we think, rolls out roles and responsibilities. And once we get that taken care of, and that can be done hopefully very soon, then the Friends can get going on the hard work. I do believe we're going to need frequent meetings with the town, the police department, and the Friends, just to, you know, I think our strategic plan refers to an annual review of the MOU, but in order to enable communication and keep it consistent, we're going to have to be sure we're touching base on a regular basis.
Thank you, Benny and Jennifer. And I just had another question in regards to the policy changes that you're looking to make. Could we dive into a little bit of that? You mentioned a surrender animals and then adopting from different states, correct? Right, you would be wanting to bring animals up from, and then you'd be providing some sort of adoption program, correct? I don't want to put words. You could just answer that policy, those policy changes.
I think the surrender piece would require a change in an ordinance.
Yeah.
So that's something that the police department would have to be amenable to initiating, I believe.
Okay.
With regard to the, bringing animals in from elsewhere, we already do have the paperwork for that, and it's already signed off on. And the animal shelter was doing that, and then it was stopped. So, and again, the details of why it was stopped, I don't know that information. There are board members who do.
No problem. Just looking to really fully understand what you guys, or the scope of the breadth of work that you guys want to do. And then my third question has to do with volunteers and the number of volunteers you'll need, and will there be somebody staffed by the Friends on a regular full-time basis, part-time basis, to sort of handle the scope of work? Because you have a pretty big, you have a lot you want to do, and I love it, just trying to understand, will there be enough support and resources there on a consistent basis to make sure it's executed and you guys are set up for success?
Exactly. And we recognize that we needed oversight. And so in our strategic plan, we have outlined that we would need we've stipulated a part-time person to oversee all of the volunteers and the programs and all of that. And we are in the process right now of writing the job description for that position. We're hoping that it will be a volunteer, someone with the board will vet, and that we'd like to approach it that way first. If that doesn't work, then we'll look at a paid part-time position that would come from the coffers of the Friends. It's critical that people understand that without volunteers, the shelter will never be able to be what we had envisioned it to be. I mean, way back when the shelter was first being designed in these initial conversations, it was very clear that this was going to be largely volunteer run, other than the specific duties that the animal control officers in the town, had to assume. And that's all, by the way, a lot of that is detailed in the MOU. But we believed, and we thought that everybody at the time was on board with the fact that to save the town money, we would have to utilize trained and vetted volunteers to get the work done. So I can't give you a number of how many volunteers we would need, but yeah.
I would add to that, Tim, that, again, this survey is still open, so we're still gathering responses. The purpose of it is to get a feel for people's interest, whether they care or not. But, the volunteer question was really telling, because everyone that's taken it has said, yes, absolutely. And not only did they say, yes, I'd like to volunteer, but we had it broken out by, would you be willing to be administrative volunteer or a fundraising volunteer? Not, of course, everyone wants to socialize animals. And if they didn't, I'm not really sure that you want them as a volunteer in an animal shelter. So that's fine. That's a given. But we need people that can also do marketing and fundraising and administration and special projects. Maybe a shelf needs to be repaired. Maybe it's cleaning. We need all those things. So a comprehensive training program for volunteers involves learning to do just about everything that needs that extra support. But if along with that, if we promote this program, and I'm a firm believer, you got to recognize people, volunteers are key. I currently serve as the VP of Development at United Way. We are based on volunteerism. That's what we do, right? If you recognize people and you provide them with the right structure and support within an environment of something that they really care about, you get an incredible number of people involved. It's a great opportunity. But I agree with Betty. You're going to need a lot of them. And you know, they are looking at a volunteer program coordinator that could really coordinate this army of people, and that's what needs to happen. It's an army of people to get it done.
Absolutely.
I mean, Jennifer, could you just say where the survey is for people who have not filled it out, who may be listening today?
It is, well, we've had it posted on Facebook. We could share it with you. If you go on the Friends of Bristol Animal Shelter Facebook, it's on there.
So Jennifer, for people who don't use Facebook, I think it would be important to give another opportunity to access it. So maybe that could be made available to more, because I think it hits a certain group, but not everyone there.
I believe it's on our website too.
Mhm.
Yeah, the link is on the website.
Okay.
The
Excellent.
website for the what, Bristol Animal Shelter or the
The
Friends?
animal shelter, the Friends of the Animal Shelter. Yeah.
Can it go on the town's website, or is that not appropriate?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
I
that we'll
don't
take a look at.
Could I just ask one more thing? I don't recall the rationale for the animals being transported up and why that was stopped. I know vaguely there was some reason, I just can't remember what, and maybe we could ask Melissa to just pull that out, those meeting minutes. Not today, I mean, just some
Okay.
reason.
Right
I
now,
saw her
Melissa,
looking
right
like, I
now.
didn't know, like, oh, I'm gonna find it right now. I'm sure, I don't even know what year it was, so.
I'm tech savvy, but I got a little work to do there. Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean anywhere near for today, but I just meant like, if you could find that for us, like in the next week or two, I think it'd just be one of those things that'd be helpful to have, along when Tim or someone was asking about the surrendered animals, and that would be an ordinance. I don't know if the question of people bringing animals up from other kill shelters was an ordinance change or a policy. I just don't recall.
So we'll take a look at that also. Aaron, I believe you were next.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Aaron Lay. I'll confess, I don't really have a lot of experience knowing how animal shelters are run. I volunteered for one time when I was just moved to Spokane, Washington, and I wanted to get involved in the community. So I did a little bit of, there was like a dog Olympics thing in Spokane or something, and I spent some time doing that. I guess what I'm trying to say is I did a little bit of reading before this about animal shelters and kind of, best practices and things like that. And I kind of learned a lot. And one of the things I learned was that really kind of a small fraction of the revenue nationally of these animal shelters nationally really comes from municipalities. So it's really kind of small. And in a lot of other parts of the countries, it's the counties that actually will, kind of run the animal shelters. And they had graphs and data about, the revenues that go to fund animal shelters. And a lot of the revenues were really not from the town. So I guess my question for you all is, have you kind of given any thought as to how you're going to go about raising revenues, what your revenue sources are going to be to run an animal shelter, and whether you have a sustainable model for how you'll go about doing something like that? And then, I'll give you a chance to answer that. And then I just have one more question that I kind of discovered through my research, and I'll ask that next.
Okay, I'll weigh in and then I'll ask Betty to follow up with me. I just want to be clear that when we talk about running the shelter, that's where that collaboration piece comes in. It is a municipal facility, it's owned by the town. And so, the objective of the Friends is not to raise money to pay for the shelter, right? It's to pay for veterinary care and other operational things that are needed in order to adopt the maximum amount of animals. But in improving those conditions and also offering educational programs and events, you could impact the bottom line because you're going to increase the number of animals that come through, and the fees from those animals, minus the veterinary care, go to the town. So our objective is to raise the number of animals that come in, as sad as that sounds, because we also want to raise the number of animals that go out and get placed in homes and engage people that way. And then educational programs are also another way to bring in money. I am an animal shelter fanatic, and I'm one of those people that when I take a course that says donate, I donate very generously because it's important work, and I think people will do that. I also think another revenue piece, a missing piece in there, is that meeting room and education room. I think that's a big opportunity. It's kind of something hiding in there. Again, we're in COVID. It's going to be hard to do that. But I could imagine, you know, corporations, other organizations that want to have a meeting or have a retreat, and they pay a fee to use that wonderful education room, knowing that that fee is going to support the shelter. It's a win-win. There's parking. It's easy to get to. It's the town of Bristol. Everything you need is there. Why wouldn't you have your meeting there? I mean, it's just, and you might get to cuddle a kitten. It's nothing better, right? So I'll let Betty weigh in, and I've covered a few points there, but it's complicated. And I understand. I appreciate that you did that research. Betty?
Yeah, I do too, Aaron. Thank you for that. I'm not sure I have anything to add, but I think John Lannon might. Can you guys allow him
I
to?
don't want to do that yet, Betty. I'd like to make sure that the council asks the rest of its questions before I open it up to the public. So, but Aaron, I know you had an additional question to that.
Yeah, it kind of ties in a little bit. This is Aaron Lay again. It kind of ties in a little bit with what Ms. Bristol was saying, and that is, you know, one of the possibilities of maybe increasing revenues is, you know, bringing more animals into the shelter. But I also noticed too that, you know, like one of the best practices for any animal shelter is that the more animals that you receive into the shelter, the more staffing that you should have in the shelter. And so with the additional staffing, you know, will require additional revenues for the running of the animal shelter. And so, like I said, I'm a little naive talking about this, and I don't really know the operational aspects of this, but these are just some of the questions that are coming to my mind. And maybe even it's something that maybe some of the others who have been kind of involved in this already might have some insights about. But I guess my concern would be that if you have a limited amount of capacity, right, you have a limited amount of revenues coming in. But if you have a great amount of capacity, you have more staff that you end up having to bring in. And to me, it might only make sense if you're doing this on an economy of scale that's statewide. And so that's just some thoughts I have. And of course, you know, I'm just collecting as much information as I can to be as informed as possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Aaron, because that's a really good point. And you know, that's where that volunteer piece would be critical. It can't be done unless there's a really robust, and they have to be trained volunteers and people that understand that it's not just holding the kittens or walking the dog, that it's cleaning the runs and cleaning the cages, caring for animals that are sick. And, you know, as it gets busier, you know, you hope that you're going to build that volunteer base as well. You know, the goal is not to add more staff. The goal is to support the good staff that are already working there, the animal control office, so that they can be out taking their calls and doing what they need to do and what they should really be focused on, and have people that can support them with whatever is brought home to the shelter. And have the friends raise the money for the veterinary care for those animals.
Yeah, Aaron, one of the things that we had done, one of the documents I will say that the Friends have generated, which we haven't shared because we were waiting for this workshop, was a whole list of ways to increase revenue. And one of them was to raise adoption fees. We've done a study and we believe that our adoption fees are woefully low. I mean, kind of ridiculously low. To raise dog licensing fees, to defaulted fines that, in other words, somebody is fined in the community and there's no follow-up. I mean, they don't pay their fine and apparently that's okay. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to become like a police state, but I am saying that if there's a repeated offender, then maybe something needs to be done. We need to reach out to other other communities more actively, to see communities that are claiming that they don't have enough space in their shelters. They're crowded. Well, we're not. So let's, come up with some sort of an agreement. I think we were close to an agreement with Portsmouth, and then that got taken out from under us. And that, frankly, that then went to the Potter League, who, as you know, have unlimited resources. So things like licensing and all of that, those are maybe small ways that we can raise funds, but I think everything's going to help. Every little bit is going to help.
Betty, could you talk to us about those two that you gave us examples for? So what is the adoption fee currently, and what would you propose it to be increased to? And what are the fines that you said were uncollected, and if collected, how much would those, so the combination, if you can give us a breakdown of both of those.
I wish I could. There are board members on this call who probably have those statistics. Can they address that?
I'm going to pin these because I want to give everyone the opportunity. And so I'll put that one down as a question I can come back to.
Okay.
Because I know that I want to give the council first. And I have a couple of questions for the chief. He's also on.
Yes.
Tony, I want to give you an opportunity first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was very nicely done. And thank you for the amount of work that was put into it to really come up with this presentation, as well as the memorandum. As to the issue there with the interstate paths, there were two, actually, I do recall, and it was quite costly to the town. Actually became a matter of litigation, and it came before the town council. But I'm not going to, expand on that. I'll let Melissa dig up the accurate information. But I do recall those specific cases, and that's the reason why we put a stop to it. In fact, it may have happened while I was administrator, if I'm not mistaken. So that being said, you brought up a good point about the dog license. I'm not so sure that if that's under our jurisdiction, it's under the state. Because I know we have to contribute a certain amount to the state for every license that we collect, for the fee that we collect. So I'm not so sure that they would fall under, but I mean, that doesn't mean it's out of reach and that it cannot be looked at. I mean, $5, let's face it, it's not a whole lot for for a dog license, so.
And you get to drive on.
Please.
Right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So just thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. So before I open, I know we have some members, the board members, so I know that they'll be able to add some clarity here in a moment. But Chief, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. There was a couple times in the conversation so far was talking about surrendering animals. Could you speak to that for a moment, please, sir?
Yes, there currently is a policy. Mary is correct. It's something that we certainly could revisit, or the council could, put it on the docket and formally discuss it amongst its members. But I do want to say that there is not a complete moratorium on surrendering of animals. I've spoken to the supervisor, Deb De Silva, about this very same issue. She has assured me that in esoteric cases of a domestic violence incident, or we had an elder dog owner who had to go into the hospital or senior living care, and there were just some timelines that couldn't be met, we did assist these Bristol residents in these emergency type situations. I would like to say that, I like to have the flexibility to flex some management rights as the chief on an individual basis and make those decisions in the best interest of the animal and residents that find themselves in an emergency situation. We just don't turn our back on the folks that are moving out of town. One of the issues was before my arrival here was Roger Williams students were in and out of the university on a semester yearly basis, and they were just kind of wanting to turn the animals in like it was a DVD rental. And that's an unfortunate situation sometimes, but we do work hand in glove with our residents and there's outreach groups. There are a lot of support in the arena of animal care and adoption. It's not just the Friends who do an unbelievable job, the Potter Leagues, the SPCAs. There are a lot of networks and groups that find homes for animals, and our ACO staff work diligently. And I would like to say 100% of the time, we do find a home for the animals that folks no longer have the capacity to take care of. And in emergency situations, I do flex my management rights, make those decisions. Certainly with support from Deb when she, lays out the circumstances to me, and we are caring for our residents and the animals in those esoteric situations.
That was good. I'd also like to speak just for a moment on the animals from other communities. That was a policy of this council. I was on the council when that policy was put in place. We were very clear to say that there would be no animals from other communities coming into the shelter until there was additional talks on that. And I know because I was part of that conversation. The idea behind it was to understand our need locally before we then reached out to other communities. And I don't want to go on too long because I know that there are some board members that wanted to answer a couple of questions here, and I'll come back to this in a little bit. But the goal was, in my belief, is that the shelter is there to work with the issues that we have locally, or the concerns that we have locally, or the need that we have locally. I don't believe that the shelter is there to bring other animals in unless it's a revenue based, and then there's also larger benefit there, meaning we talked about other communities. Betty brought up Portsmouth was one, and Portsmouth was an opportunity. They were already with the Potter League, and they decided to stay with the Potter League because it was most attractive. And quite honestly, Potter League does, and no one's saying otherwise, but they do an outstanding job. So it was exciting to consider that we could offset some of the costs with Portsmouth or through Portsmouth. But there were some questions that we needed to answer there too, right? In where the cost would be with, for example, was veterinary bills was talked about a few times. How long is too long? What happens when it is too long? Those kind of things. But I don't want to digress and go too far down that road. I'm going to now, and I want to give my colleagues one more opportunity. Any questions before I open it up to the board members?
Mr. Chairman, I just had one final question for myself.
Go ahead.
And, that involves partnerships. Jennifer, you had talked about partnerships and in being open, and you guys being open to that, and partnerships maybe with other towns and municipalities. Is that true? Am I hearing that correctly? Just want to make sure that that's clear.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm a partnership kind of gal, so I'm always promoting the partnerships. That's the way you grow. So, I think that every opportunity for a partnership has to be considered and explored. You ultimately want to make sure you're meeting your own goals without being selfish about it, but then see where the connection is, where you can both serve each other. Great example is what Mount Hope Farm does with Brown University. Supports Brown University's lands and buildings. Brown has a contract with Mount Hope Farm. Farm gets some revenue. Brown gets their land taken care of. Check. It's all those things. So I think there are opportunities, and I do think it would take some digging and some work. But if any town can do it, it's this town, and I think it could set an example for the way things could work. And I would even go as far to say, educational opportunities. I know there's been a lot of talk about having a vet. Having a vet in a shelter is very expensive. But, down the road, I could envision, maybe you have someone that's right out of veterinary school. Maybe this is their opportunity to have a residency, right? So when I talk about partnerships, I mean, how can we meet our needs and also help someone else along too? And it can be done.
Right. And I think, when I'm talking about partnerships, I'm talking about the pie as a whole, and you have the police department and you have the animal friends of the animal shelter in there. But say another municipality wanted to come to us and say, hey, listen, we have a crumbling animal shelter. We have some severely animals in need. will you guys enter an agreement? I just wanted to make sure, here out in the open while we're all discussing, you guys are open to that or close to that. And I just think it's from
Yeah, I think they would be open to it, but I would also, looking through the town lens and through the town council lens, say open to it as long as it's not going to be an added expense for us that has no benefit to the whole. So that is something, Tony's point was well taken. Sometimes trying to do the right thing can cost you a lot of money. And we do have to think about that while we're trying to do the right thing.
Good. Thank you very much.
Could I make a couple of points when it's my turn?
Yes, you can. Go ahead. Go ahead, Chief.
Okay. I first just wanted to talk about, I see Captain Burke is on the call, and he did yeoman's work in trying to sign an agreement with Portsmouth. And it simply was not because of anything that was wrong with Bristol, our shelter, our management structure, just the hometown advantage, and the Parter League, won that at the last minute. But he's also working currently with the town of Warren and I believe the Tiverton. And he's expressed to those communities our willingness and the availability at the shelter to board those animals. So we do continue to explore revenue options to expand our services at the shelter. And there was just a couple of talking points that I jotted down. There is no overtime issue, which was originally stated at the shelter. We finished last year within budgetary guidelines, and we will do the same this fiscal year. There was just an adjustment of staff. Somebody had gone on leave. Part-time folks had filled that full-time status. And when that employee had returned back to full status, the part-timers prior to my arrival were on the full-time schedule. So we had overlapping of folks. So I kind of had to modify the schedule and to make it fit what the council had approved so that it operated within fiscal concerns. The shelter, for town residents that are listening, is operating within the fiscal controls that have been set by the town administrator and this council. I can assure you of that. And we will continue to do our best in yeoman's work to continue down that path. We continue to identify proper maintenance. We were there today looking at what needs to be done to maintain this beautiful facility. Although it's only a few years old, you have to stay on top of it and make sure that we're addressing each and every issue. And that's extremely important that we protect the investment in the infrastructure. The other talking point that I had was certainly to talk about the shelter and its operation. And I believe the shelter supervisor is on. They're doing an exemplary job. Perhaps maybe the conversation meant to say that we want to increase adoptions, but I can tell you that we have the highest adoption rate, if not the best out there in the state. Our team working in concert with the Friends. The Friends currently host the webpage. So the town doesn't have a separate or ancillary webpage. It's the Friends that do the hosting and do a lot of the work in helping getting the animals adopted. And we have a 5-star performance when it comes to adopting the animals that are within the Bristol Animal Shelter. I think it's important, at least for me, that everybody knows that that is being properly managed. It's running fiscally sound, and it is a very tight operation for what it is. If the talks are about expanding it and filling up the vacancy in it, that's a different discussion. And I don't mean to self-promote. It was done my predecessor, and it continues to build upon that excellence that was left with me. So much so that Department of Business Regulation came in, did a COVID inspection, and they gave us a 12 out of 12. We posted that online. You'll probably see tomorrow in the Bristol Phoenix an article going about the fact that we're one of the only 4 shelters in the state that are DEM certified in an evacuation and emergency, where residents that had to be displaced could put their animals in our shelter. We are now certified. And that had to do with the good work of the police department, Lieutenant Wozni, who secured a grant through emergency management for over $60,000 to put a generator in, and obviously an inspection of our facility. And Mrs. Janet Coit, the DEM director, just recently approved us being this prestigious status of being a DEM certified evacuation shelter. And I think I heard Betty and Jennifer talk about John Lannon. I'd also like to thank him. He came and did some of the construction and the footing work, so where the generator could go. So he certainly, his name is mentioned in our news release, deserves some credit for being a great partner there as well. We, I think I've echoed this. I'm an employee of the town, and I believe in delivering desired outcomes. But we have a very big shelter. We have availability and space, and I've looked at every different avenue, and that's how we got down to the road of the SPCA. And I certainly will take direction from my boss, the town administrator, and the council about how, or to forget that particular proposal, how you would like me to move forward with those particular conversations. Again, with Warren and Tiverton, it always would come in front of the council for final approval of a contract. But we stand ready and available to work in concert with any support network with the Friends. We remain open. I would like them to know that we are a welcoming partner, and we will do whatever is the desire of the town and the residents to deliver the best outcomes. It has always been my goal. I've always been a fiscal conservative person, to find creative ways to reduce the burden of operating the shelter. And this is the reason why I've delivered back some proposals that to the town council for consideration. It's certainly not the way of the police department. It's our job to present you folks with some ideas to make the ultimate decisions and provide direction to us.
Thanks, Chief. So I'd like to, unless you had Captain Burke, I'm not sure if you were sharing something before I wanted to give the other members a moment to share some thoughts, but Chief, was there something else that you wanted from Captain Burke before I do that?
No, Captain Burke is here. Just if there's any questions about adoption rates and different things, and we're both pretty in tune. He's presented me with some reports. So no, I don't think there's any additional follow-up.
I do have some questions, Captain, but I'm going to wait. Again, I'd like to, I keep saying I'm going to open it up, and I'm not doing it. It's like standing out in front of a restaurant that you want to get into. Could you please let me in? So I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to come back to you, Sarah, and I wanted to ask you some questions about exactly that, adoption and the amount of animals that have been there, not necessarily the last year, because there's so many strange things about COVID, and this would be one of them, but maybe the last couple of years. So the person with their hand up is John Lannon. So Chris, if you could give John access. And I haven't yet asked anyone to state their name and address for the record. Typically, we would go down that road, but John, you are a member of the Friends of the Animal Shelter and on paperwork and all of that. So, but I'm going to ask that moving forward, if there anyone else that does speak, that we get to name and address for the record. So go ahead, John.
Good evening. I caught most of the presentation. I was a little bit late, so I apologize. That said, want to thank you guys all for having the workshop. I wanted to start off by complimenting Chief Lynch. We might have met under different circumstances in the beginning, but he's met with us several times. The interaction has been outstanding. He's a stand-up guy. We've opened up lines of communication. So, I mean, that's important. Maybe sometimes you start off maybe on a little bad footing. And I got to tell you, I'm more than happy to work with him. I'll speak for him in any room with anyone. He's a good guy. That said, the generator's up and running. That's pretty cool. I think to address the expenses, I just like to remind this council that previous councils and by a bond issue, the bond for the shelter was passed like years ago, approved by the town by over 80%. So I'd like to just keep that off to the side. It seems Chief Lynch has the operating expenses within the budget, and we're going to try to help augment that with volunteerism. The volunteers used to be strong there. For reasons over the years, I guess it dwindled. COVID hasn't helped. There was a few changes in command. The ACO was changed. For whatever reason, I think the Friends have shown that they're willing to get things back in line again and maybe extend the operation and through volunteers. So the town is not a burden at all with some of these programs. I think just to look at the memorandum of understanding that wasn't really spoken of, maybe you're going to have Mike Ursillo look at it, but I think the memorandum is going to be needed, and not today because I think quite frankly, today we all seem to be on the same page. I just look back at how we got here and somewhat of a new council, somewhat of a new chief, a new animal control officer, and all of a sudden, all the things that we kind of knew from the beginning with the former chief and the former ACO and the former council were all forgotten, not intentionally, but nobody knew like where that light switch was. So we had to reinvent our relationship, remind everybody who we were and the friends. So maybe you'd be doing a future council and future board members a service by just coming up with some sort of an MOU, and it doesn't have to be that one. Maybe you ask Mike or Sillo or whoever you would to look it over and maybe comment on that. And let's work towards having one just to leave for the people that follow us someday. I'd like to think you'll all be our council for the next 20 years. I enjoy every one of you individually for many reasons. Steve's a good friend. I'm liking the chief, but let's face it, if we're not here, we could revisit this whole thing in another 10 years, or who knows, when somebody's going to say, well, what is the deal? So maybe we could just codify that, not to steal a popular word these days, where we can work on something to that end. If you have any questions, I'm here to help. I was late to the meeting, so I didn't get to do the screen thing, but I'll get off, Nate, but I'll remain for the meeting. If there's a question that I need to answer, just put me back.
Actually, John, I do. Earlier, Betty had mentioned that there was opportunities. She said that the current adoption fees were woefully low. So it sounded like there's an opportunity, or at least presented an opportunity to increase those. And also she'd mentioned that fines were levied, but not collected. So my question to Betty, and she mentioned that you may be a better person to answer this or have the knowledge base on it, on this particular part, was what is the current adoption rate? And I certainly, the chief can give me that too, but what would be the proposed increase? What do we see for those increases? So I guess what I'm saying is, what do we realize for revenues from that? And then also those fines, what aren't collected and what would we realize if they were?
Unfortunately, Nate, Betty thought I might have that answer, and like the solid C student I was in high school, I'm not able to give you those answers. However, they are woefully low from what I'm told, and I think a review of all of those licensing, adoption fees, and don't forget, there's going to be fees if we get it back into this rescue program that was pretty successful and it works all over the state. But there's a good amount of money to be had there. And we can work on an equitable distribution of those funds also.
Okay, thank you, John. So, thank you. So I'd like to now go to Captain Burke. Captain, I don't know if you have the current adoption rates. Do you know what they are? I'm sorry. What I mean by that is the fee itself, I should have said. And then also maybe you could speak a little bit about the adoption rates and also our overall numbers. And again, I think we need to make sure that we're obviously reasonable and realistic with the last 12 months of COVID that we've all been dealing with. So go ahead, sir.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So currently the adoption fees set by town ordinance for dogs are $250 and for cats are $150. Last year I did a comprehensive study of the animal shelter and I looked at some of the numbers with regards to intake of animals, dogs and cats, and what the adoption rates were. So in 2017, there were 217 animals that were intaked into the shelter, with 99 animals being adopted in that year. In 2018, there were 172 intake animals with 64 adoptions. And in 2019, there was 103 intakes with 84 animals that were adopted. And those numbers, they came right from DEM and they're accessible on their website, because every animal that's turned into the shelter has to be well documented as to when it's turned in and when it's adopted.
Captain, could you just, we don't go too far forward. I'm hoping that you're not going to give me a morbid answer, but when you say that, for example, 2019 was 103 intake and then 84 were adopted, there's obviously a disparity in those numbers. What is what happens to the ones that were not? Are these that passed away, were sick or something? Is that generally the response?
Yeah, so there are other categories that included there that I didn't account for. So there are animals that get turned into the shelter, and the ACOs will, if they don't get a phone call as to who the animal owner is, either through a dog tag or through some other means, then that animal can be adopted after 5 days at the shelter. So there are, out of the 217 animals that were, at the shelter in 2017, 99 were adopted, and there are other categories, return to owner, and things
gotcha,
like
thank
that. So yeah,
That
so
makes me feel better.
yeah, most of the animals that do come into the shelter are returned to owner. So example, in 2017, out of the 217 animals, 107 were returned to the owner. So majority of the animals are returned to the owner. They're just considered lost or stray animals temporarily.
Got it. Thank you. So I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, please.
Nope, that's all I have.
Okay. All right. What questions from the council so far? Mary? Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
There you are.
Just to follow up quickly on the, so did you look, Captain Burke, at other communities and what they charge? Because I've looked at some of them over, and I don't think this is that cheap. I so to speak, like 250. I mean, are people doing more than like say 300 or 350 on some
Unfortunately,
of the
part of my review did not include any consideration at the time for increasing our fees in town. It was strictly looking at the operation of the shelter where it currently stood, the capacity of the shelter, how many animals are brought in, how many animals go out. I did not take any consideration in looking at other communities as far as their adoption rates. I did contact other communities to see how they did operate their shelters. There are 2 other municipal shelters in the state of Rhode Island that work collectively with other municipalities, but it's not so much them taking animals in, it's just more their ACOs working under one roof, so to speak. They do have collaborations or MOUs, pacts where they can respond to other jurisdictions and perform animal control duties in other jurisdictions. And if they have an animal, say for instance, Portsmouth, they don't have an animal shelter, the Portsmouth Police Department they would bring the animals to Bristol, which is the case in North Providence and Lincoln. They just share one building, but they operate 2 municipalities out of one building.
Mary, I can speak in personal experience. My family and I have adopted 3 black labs. Labs for Rescue is one of the services. Gosh, I'm forgetting the other name of the other one, but regardless, it was about $450, and that included all the veterinary fees and, depending on spayed, neutered, whatever it happens to be, and the cost to help them offset some of the responsibility. And actually, that's kind of one of the points that I wanted to make, which was, I got to be honest, I am absolutely not for taking animals from other communities unless there was, we talked about agreements earlier from Portsmouth, or whether it's from other communities or other states. I look at this service very much like I look at the post office. Post office is, there are good men and women that work there that have been do an excellent job, but FedEx and UPS and others found an opportunity to do that. And I don't think we need to duplicate efforts. And certainly, as I just pointed out, I'm a dog lover, so is my family. So this is not about loving the animals or putting dollars first, but I mean, that is part of what we're supposed to be, and we certainly consider here. My quick research in regards to budgeting on this was that it's about it's not $450,000, but it's approaching in the current fiscal year for the cost of the animal shelter. When I say cost, I mean all the costs that you'd expect, right? There's labor costs involved, but then there's also, John Landon had pointed out, the bond. Well, there's the yearly payment on the bond that would be included into that. So Jennifer mentioned, and quite honestly, rightly so, that is it the Friends' responsibility to raise funds? No, I really don't think it is. But I also see that if there's an opportunity to work with, whether it's multiple communities or it was referenced earlier about the SPCA. So we talked about the SPCA back, gosh, it's been so long now. I'm sorry what month it was. But first, it wasn't it was a presentation. It wasn't an agreement next step. It wasn't a proposal from them. It was dialogue about opportunity. What I guess I hear here myself is that there is dwindling numbers, which we all agree on, which quite honestly is a wonderful problem. I mean, it tells me that the people of Bristol are keeping their animals, taking care of their animals. I remember when I first got on the council, Mary would advocate very, very strongly for Paws Watch, right? And does it mean that we still don't have an issue here and there? Of course, there's always going to be a stray. But I mean, I think it's wonderful that we're in this place. I guess where I kind of veer off the path of where we've been talking about is that I don't think it's the town's responsibility. In fact, I take that back. It's not the town's responsibility to find animals from other communities to increase our utilization. I'm going to use the words that were used earlier. The utilization is supposed to be a response to the need. I'm going to use a crass example, and in no way am I suggesting animals are this, but if another community has extra trash and we have capacity, we certainly don't get that because we've already budgeted for it. I said it was a crass one, and I'm no way connecting animals and that together. The point is that if we have an opportunity to save money here, I think we should. And it's not just money. Is there opportunities for us to use those funds in other places? And is there opportunity for us to increase education and all the things that we've all said here tonight that we very much see value in? So I guess coming back to it, I didn't start this, and I should have said the Friends have done some outstanding work and they continue to. I guess for myself, I don't see an opportunity looking at other opportunities as a binary choice. I don't think it's thank you, Friends, for all of your hard work, go home. By no means. Quite honestly, the continued success is in great part from the Friends. So can that happen through opportunities with SPCA, RISPCA, or an organization like that? I think we should explore it. If we can increase services, decrease costs, and I don't know why we wouldn't. I don't believe that filling the animal shelter, increasing utilization and using it because we have it. I think we need to find opportunities for cost savings. We get here every year about budget. We talk about the schools, we talk about seniors, we talk about a myriad of things. Our responsibility, and I forgot who said this to me, but you can tell the character of a civilization by how they treat their animals, right? So I'm paraphrasing close, but that's the gist of it. That's our responsibility, and we take it serious, and we have. I just would love us to go to and do what we do it better with all of us together and save money at the same time, or at least attempt to do that. $450,000 a year, if we were to able to save, God, half of that, I mean, there are a myriad of things that we could do and not raise taxes and increase services. I think it's outstanding. So
Could I just say
Mary,
something in response to that a little bit? And I haven't totally thought this out, but I think you really have to have a cost benefit analysis, because if the Friends, as they've said, it's not their job to pay for the shelter. It's to pay for the extras. And they have always been good about paying for the veterinary services, for extra food, whatever the case may be, and for many of the parts of the current shelter that we have that the town did not have the money to do. So I think one of the things that Bristol's animal shelter has always been known for, and I think has gotten sort of national attention for over the years, is the fact that it's a no-kill shelter. And if you are going to go down that path, then do you then rescue some animals? You may put a cap on that from kill shelters. So you're looking at in certain parts of the country, kill shelters, from what I understand, and I'm not an expert on any, I don't spend a lot of time looking at this, but kill shelters are a very commonplace. And so if the friends want to bring up animals and we have the space and they're going to be providing the veterinary care and so forth, I don't think it should be ruled out. Now, I don't think it should be on Bristol taxpayers to be having, I have no idea what the number is going to make up a number like 300 dogs a year coming up from another state. But I mean, some number, and if it's going to be based on what it costs to adopt that animal, and the fact that we don't have many choices. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people that have gone out to other shelters to get a dog or a cat, because there aren't many choices in our shelter. And then I do think that, we could be just like hurting ourselves more by not having those options. So I just think we have to think about it. I think there's a lot of analysis that needs to be looked at. And I don't think it should just be ruled out, because it may be, if we're going to charge a few $100s, and I don't know what other communities are charging. I have looked, I'm not a dog. It's not that I don't like dogs. I just don't have a dog, and I don't really, I don't have the time to deal with it, have a dog. But as far as cats go, I mean, I've looked at it here and there since my cat passed away. And, I can't imagine that I've seen some high costs, but I can't imagine there'd be more than say $250 for a cat. So I don't know how much that is, but we have to take a look at that. And in the same vein, on the surrendering of animals, I mean, people sometimes just have no choice and they can't have their animal anymore. Somebody's allergic or whatever the case may be. And I just never believe that the option to taking out a pet is to put the cat on the street because mom and dad said no to the Roger Williams student. And that's what perpetuated our big Paws Watch problem. So I don't think we should rule that out. I'm not saying you're suggesting that, Nathan. I'm just saying that there may be a cost benefit to us that we're not looking at. We really have to look and explore that. And what makes this shelter well known in the shelter world, I think we were one of the first no-kill shelters in Rhode Island. Am I correct about that? Anybody? I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly or not, but I just think that that's an important point.
But I think, your point earlier that you just made about putting the cat on the street, I think I don't know if that's actually the choice. And what I mean by that is, we talked about the Potter League earlier. There are multiple places. My family and I, when we chose to get to adopt an animal, we used a nonprofit volunteer service. And I don't know if we have to offer, just because we don't have it doesn't make it bad. I guess I'm looking in this a little bit differently. I think that our job is to make sure that we're addressing the issues of Bristol. I was going to say community, but Bristol. If the animals aren't here, that's good news. But we have this budget already. We have this commitment already. So how do we utilize what we already have? I don't think we use it with extra animals if there's no revenues from that. And if we have an increase in adoption or in need from Bristol, then we deal with those things. But if we don't, I don't think we add extra cost. I don't see the value in that when there are so many other opportunities out there. I keep saying Potter League because it's the only one that's coming to my head at the moment. But SPCA in East Providence, I adopted a cat from there years ago, right? So there are so many opportunities. I don't think we're not trying to compete to be the best place to adopt in my head. I think what we're trying to compete is that for Bristol, with animals that need our care, that we are outstanding when you compare us to other communities, any place else maybe. And I think that's currently the truth. So
I do think that we have to take a look at all those in way more detail. I mean, I wouldn't want to see no revenue come in as a result, but I mean, if you've got this big facility, I mean, now is the question right along. Are we going to be able to have another town come in with us or whatever the case may be? Not everyone has the ability or realizes or knows all the resources. So they may not be able to go to, I want a Labradoodle, I'm going to go to the rescue for Labradoodles, not everybody knows that. And not everyone, I mean, one of the other things when you look at the fees, and that's a whole nother discussion when we get further down the road, not everyone has the resources. Doesn't mean they would be a bad pet parent. It means they don't have $300, $400, $500 to put out to adopt an animal. And I think that we have to be cognizant of that. And every once in a while you see, you know, I hate to use the word specials, but they might be like, you know, we're going to reduce our fee for older animals or whatever the case may be. But I mean, they're great companions, and senior citizens may not be able to pay that kind of money. And I think we have to be aware of that as well. So I think there's a lot of issues here, but I don't think we should rule anything out. And I think we should, but we can't keep what we have as a shelter and then have a whole bunch of people that, you know, the friends that want to raise money. And I can't remember what your Mardi Gras used to bring in, but I think it was a substantial amount when you used to have that event. I mean, we need to be able to utilize it and to do it in a way, but not to be costing the town money. But we need to kind of do that cost benefit analysis. That's what I'm saying.
I'm smiling because I clearly recall going to a Mardi Gras event and bidding on a cooking portion. I forgot what restaurant it was. And we bid, and somebody came back and bid more. And then we bid more, and they came back and bid more. Turns out it was Joe and Betty Brito, and we had no way of keeping up with them. We got out of their way. But it was, you know, there was so many people like that. And it's kind of to the point, which is there's so much give back and there's so much efforts and energy that have been done. But Mary, I think you hit it on the head. I think it's important that we look at multiple opportunities, including what's being presented by the Friends. I think we need to look at this pragmatically and say, what's 5 years out? Tim and I and Jennifer had a conversation going back a couple of months. I appreciated Jennifer's pragmatic approach, so in Tim's, and saying, how do we, you know, can this happen? Does what's being presented, does it have a 5-year life on it? Does it have more than a 5-year life on it? And if it doesn't, does it make sense? And again, I don't think it's, we're going to choose a winner. I think is we win by choosing a multitude of things and making sure that the Friends are involved. And by the way, I've been saying Friends too, but the police department does an outstanding job. I mean, this doesn't happen without the management that's happened. And also, I'm looking at you, Tony, as a prior administrator and the current administrator. There's a lot of efforts in this council, you know, because we pay for it. The Friends, you're right, you shouldn't have to be the largest revenue there, but we are responsible for taxpayer dollars. And are we spending it correctly here? I don't think we want to do, well, let me say what we do want to do, which is let's find an opportunity here. So let's button this up. I'm not shutting it down because I want to make sure the council doesn't have any other questions. I know that there's someone that wanted to share a point here. I can see her hand raised, so I'll get to them in a moment. But first, I'm going to ask the council. I'm going to go to Betty and then the person who's named JT, and we'll get a little bit more in a second. So council first.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, I think what we need here is a feasibility study in regard to really uncovering the strengths and weaknesses operationally, economically, legal policy, scheduling. Yes, the police do a great job. We know what we want to leverage operationally. We have low animals. How do we increase that economically? We also need to identify exactly how much we want to make. What are we looking to do? Offset the bond? Are we looking to offset expenses? And also policy-wise, what do we want to change? And then timeline and scheduling. So I think this all needs to wrap into a study. And I think Captain Burke has done a really great job of putting a lot of those pieces together. And I think the Friends of the Animal Shelter, I look at them as a very much of a strength as part of the pie to fit in. And I'm just trying to, how do we marry this all together? And I just think we need to take it to the next level with a feasibility study. But I'm thinking out loud with you guys all together here. I don't know what you think.
I agree more, Tim, is that facts, knowledge is power. So knowing where we are and where we go from here, and well put that Captain Burke and the chief did some great information. Quite honestly, so did the Friends. But Betty, wait, I'm sorry. Before I, council, before I go to Betty? No, Betty?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, ask you to be careful to, when you get into this feasibility study and whatever, I know there's a lot of follow-up that has to be done. Offsetting the bond, I mean, what I'm concerned about is that you're going to get an organization like you already did, the SPCA, come in and suggest that they could pay off your bond and they could take over the Bristol Animal Shelter. I mean, that just doesn't sit well. I have I have to say that. It's, and that is not my idea of a partnership. That is a takeover. That would have been a forfeit of the Bristol Animal Shelter to another entity. That's what I mentioned at the very beginning. I can't imagine how the local people would react to that. The people who had given substantial amounts of money to build this as a Bristol Animal Shelter. I mean, we didn't back that many years ago say, we're going to build a Bristol Animal Shelter, but should it get in trouble or, we're not, then we'll just sell it to somebody else or release it to somebody else. We didn't think about doing that with other bond, issues that we had. Why is it that we're thinking of that debt service so strongly with the animal shelter? I'm just really concerned that we ought to be able to figure this out. Utilization, we agree with you. We need to utilize the shelter. So let's figure out ways to do that. And we believe we have presented to you in both the memorandum of understanding and our strategic plan ways to make that happen. And Nathan, I hate to say that, when you talk about not caring for other people's animals, it brings to mind at the very outset of this, there was a town councilor who said, and stuck by his guns, that there was no way that we were going to be able to bring any other animals into the Bristol Animal Shelter. They're not our animals. Come on, people, as they say, and we've heard nationally, we're all in this together. If there are animals that need caring for and we've got space and it's revenue generating, why not? You can't have it both ways. You can't say the shelter is underutilized, but we're not going to let you do X, Y, Z to fill it. So, let's negotiate. Let's sit down and talk about it. But I just think I'm fearful that if we end up with some agreement like the SPCA was offering, that there's going to be a lot of really, really unhappy people in town.
Thank you.
I do think that before you go to that step, I know that the proposal that you've all set out would deserve a shot, in my personal opinion, before you go to that step. I mean, if that doesn't work and the proposal doesn't preclude bringing them in as a partner in some way and working together. I mean, if they have millions of dollars in resources, even if it was Platter League, how can we work together? And I think that's what Jennifer was talking about. That's what we all want to do. Anybody that does fundraising, grants, whatever, we all want to leverage every resource that we have and be able to, get the best and the win-wins that we can. So, I mean, I don't think one necessarily precludes the other in terms of if we went down this on the path with the friends, it doesn't preclude us working with the other groups. I do think it may preclude if you went down with the SPCA first, it may preclude the friends in their ability because they have invested so much already. So I do think it's worth taking it, whatever the next step is, to look at some of this other stuff. I was just looking really quickly on my phone, what the fees were, for example, at Potter League, and cats were $150, dogs were like $300, puppies more, kittens more, that type of thing. I mean, we should kind of do that basic analysis and what is reality, what could we bring in with the staff that we have? I mean, you're not going to go from hardly any animals and a small group of volunteers to the place being overwhelmed with the same staff and the same number of volunteers. I mean, it's going to take a while to get there, and it's going to have to be incremental in order for that to happen. And what does that part look like? I mean, I think you laid out a lot of the timeline in the information that you submitted in terms of some of the bigger pictures. But I mean, how do we get from, a handful of animals to, maybe 1.5 times that number to twice that number, et cetera. So I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do. And then what are other people charging? How we compare? We look at that stuff all the time. I mean, it's not anything that we've never not done before. We look at it all the time for everything.
And Betty,
so-
just for clarity on that, or you made the question about, you made the point about not having animals from other communities. Just for clarity, what I meant, if I wasn't clear, and I apologize if I wasn't, was that if there's an animal from another community, I think we would approach it, or we would need to approach it just like a student from another community, is that there's tuition. So we do not pay for educating students from other communities, unless if they're coming in or one of our students is going to another community, then the money follows the child on that. And I think that would be, so it's important to say that I'm not suggesting that we can't take other animals in, but if we do, it can't just be for free. It can't just be to utilize and fill up kennels.
No.
It's got to be for significantly going towards revenues. How's that? So
Yes.
So I'm going to open JT. So Chris, I would ask if you could allow JT to speak, and if you could unmute and state your name and address you can state your name. You're a board member, JT? I don't know who you are.
Yes, my name is Jocelyn Turner. The address is 31 Bradford Street, Bristol, Rhode Island. I am the board secretary.
Yes, thank you. Welcome.
All right, so thanks for allowing me the chance to speak tonight. I wanted to answer some questions, but obviously you guys have kind of gone back and forth. I have done a lot of research on dog fees for increase in revenue for the shelter. From what I have found, our fees are significantly lower than most of the places in the state, including Potter, the RSPCA, other municipal shelters. They range from $350 to $550, I would say, on average for dogs. That's up to date with all vaccines, spayed and neutered, and heartworm and Lyme tested, which is important. I would say with my research, I found that cats and kittens are under, probably we should be $75 to $100 higher. And that is with vaccines being spayed and neutered and a feline leukemia test, which actually the Potter League doesn't do, and they really should do. So we definitely undercut ourselves on adoption fees, which that is kind of important because we are providing a service. If you're trying to look for rescues in the state, which I've also looked into their adoption fees, typically most rescues currently are doing dogs, and they can be from $500 to $650. Depending on the breed is sometimes the more expensive, or if they're puppies, they get more money for puppies. So that is kind of the disparity there, but we definitely should be raising our fees for those adoptions. I also just wanted to address, the board has spent a long time kind of trying to come up with this proposal for you guys. And as it was broached to us, it was about utilization of the shelter, but I've come to see sitting through this meeting tonight that it really actually is about generating revenue. And I'm a little horrified to hear that it's because the money should be allocated in other ways. And honestly, the analogy you used about other people's trash being put out on the street and us taking that trash to our town, and kind of coinciding that with what we're talking about, animal care and rescue and saving these animals, that's really bad. And I think we all need to get on the same page here. If it's about underutilization, we have a plan. If it's really about generating revenue for you guys, which is what it really seems like it is, then we kind of all need to sit down and figure out a new plan for that, is I guess what I have to say.
Thank you.
Steve Contenti.
Mr. Administrator, go ahead.
Thanks. I'd just like to weigh in. I think the workshop, it was very valuable. and it was some great discussion and a couple of things that I picked up on. First of all, I think we should all be proud, everyone from town, including all those volunteers. I saw them in action for many years. They would come in at hours, after hours, when we couldn't get a full-time person. I remember calling myself from the sergeant's desk there to get a volunteer in, actually to transport animals. I don't know if it was proper or not, but that's what we did. So I had a great immense amount of respect for them. And also I have to add, and I've heard a couple of things about SPCA and the Potter League. I have never heard anything negative about each one of those organizations. And I've said this before publicly, we always considered the SPCA to be our gold standard. And I will state for the record that the former ACO used to tell me that the SPCA was the gold standard. And I never forgot that. So there was never any intention to upset the dedicated volunteers or to change anything immensely by opening up that dialogue. And that's all it was, some initial dialogue with the SPCA. We thought they were reasonable at the time. But once we saw that there was such hard feelings about that and somewhat of a betrayal of all that hard work that they did over the years, we backed right off, the town, myself, the police department. But I just want to say that the volunteers, they certainly have done a great job. And part of the problem right now is their success. We all remember the stray populations on Franklin Street at Stop and Shop. They took care of that, and that was mainly the volunteers. The other word I heard a few times tonight, and it resonated, and we all got to remember, the Friends of the Animal Shelter are a resource. They're a resource to the town of Bristol. We're charged with the responsibility of public services. That's police, fire, education, animal care. But in defense of the chairman, I get his point. We do what we can when we can for other communities and other animals. But our responsibility here, first and foremost, is all of our residents and our animals here. The other thing is, I really need to make sure that the public understands that they should not be turning in cats or dogs out on the side of the road, or there are options. And I've always seen, and that's firsthand experience, I've always seen a willingness to help, okay, at the animal shelter to find alternatives when somebody had a hardship. I know firsthand through friends close to me that they have turned in animals at the SPCA. So there are options, but it's certainly a conversation we can have. And it's up to the council if we want to take surrendered animals again. But there were issues years ago with a revolving door with animals at the university. Excuse me, we are a college town, and I think the former animal control officer could testify to that. So I just feel as if this was a very good conversation. I also heard that Chief Lynch is open. He's willing to work with them. I think we have a good thing. We have a beautiful building, state-of-the-art building, and we should kind of celebrate that. We can't fill it right now, which is a good thing. But we will look at some other opportunities. But I think we have our volunteers here. We just keep the communications open, and it needs to be a two-way communication. And the volunteers also need to understand that the police department look at things very differently. And I can tell you that after I left the building, I see things a little bit differently now also. But there's nothing wrong with the way they think. We need that type of responsibility, policy. It is animal care. You do have animals that can bite. We have had those incidences in the past. That's what's on the police officer's mind, or the officer that's in charge of that building. That's what they're concerned about. So the liability issues, but there needs to be, and I saw that in Ms. Bristol's presentation, the communication is the key here. But I don't think we're lost. I don't think we're at an impasse. We have a beautiful building. It is a public service that we're charged to fulfill, and that I think we stay on that path. A huge study to do right now. I'm going to be quite frank. I don't think it's that broken, but if we're looking to run this as a business, then it probably should be a study, because we don't run businesses well. We run public safety, public services, critical service. That's what we run exceptionally well. So if we're looking to run a business, maybe you should do it. If in the end, we all say, hey, you know what, we're doing a pretty good job, we'll help where we can, then I think we keep the communications open and we got the right person at the helm of the police department to help us with that. So those are my thoughts. And again, I don't think this is a bad thing. I think we kind of recognize what the issues are. And I think we really should celebrate the successes that we've had over the last like 10 years. We've done really well with animal care in Bristol. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I'm going to take a second, and Jocelyn made a point about my earlier comment. And although I'm usually pretty good at metaphors and analogies, as I was saying it before, I actually fixed it later on with the analogy with tuition, and that was certainly more appropriate. So it was not, and I did say it beforehand, it wasn't supposed to be vulgar, but I know it came across that way to some, and for that I apologize, because that's, I think you all know me better than that, but I did say it and I apologize, and it wasn't supposed to be the color that it came off to be. So is there anything else from the council? How about oh, sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Sorry, I know I had my actual hand, the official hand up. I do think that, we should have a plan, like even if we come back at the next council meeting and this becomes an agenda item, I mean, where, I understand Steve's point, but where are we going to go with this? I mean, do we look at I agree with John Lannon that there probably should be a memorandum of understanding or agreement with the Friends, because way back before this group of friends, way back when I was first on the council, in my first iteration, there was some issues with the volunteers. So I do think having that in writing is a good thing. And I think that we shouldn't just let things go on, because we're never going to address the utilization if we don't start somewhere. And I think this is a good starting place. So, I mean, I don't know that, like, what are the next steps? Is it to think about this and it will be on the next council agenda to say we want to, or are we going to say tonight, let's move forward and flesh out the MOU further? I mean, does everybody agreement with that? I'm not really sure who, what we all think about it. We didn't have a chance to discuss it tonight. I don't know what the chief's view is on that. I don't know what Steve's view is on that. I mean, I think there needs to be, or another follow-up workshop to discuss that aspect of it. I mean, we have a group that's willing to put more work and more resources into this. And I think a lot of it is about utilization, but of course we have to worry about the costs as well, because we don't have unlimited funds and neither do the Friends. So that's why we have to make sure that we're going at a slow but steady pace of what we're going to do. And then, and so we do need some numbers in how we're going to make sure that, we're not taking in tons of animals from other places that are going to cost us lots and lots of money, and we're not going to get that back in some way. But I do think we need to have like a clear next step before we leave tonight as to what that's going to be. As I said, another workshop, another work group to flesh this out a little further, or to bring it up at the next council meeting. We have to do something, or else we're going to be we're going to be discussing this again in 6 months, and about the utilization issues and so forth.
Mr. Administrator?
Yeah, so if I could make a recommendation, it would be that the Friends meet with Chief Lynch. I'll be happy to also sit in, but I think Chief Lynch works most directly with the shelter and the volunteers. And they work on that MOU. And as it was presented, yeah, there probably will be things that the town will request that they're changed, but at least we'll know what the relationship is moving forward. And I can't speak for the 5 council, and certainly it is up to the council, but it was, and I've said this before, we didn't think it was a bad thing getting into negotiation or it wasn't even a negotiation. It was more like some dialogue with the SPCA, but it was clear that we have our volunteers here. We've already made the decision 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, to invest into our own shelter for the animals of Bristol and the people of Bristol. So that's done. That was resolved. We have to somewhat kind of live with the decisions of the past, I think. And that's fine, perfectly fine. So I think we are on the right track, Councilwoman Perrella. I think it's The decision 10 years ago to build a beautiful animal shelter was made. The decision to have an education room was made. I think we have to give it a fair shot. And as the presentation stated earlier, there was some lapse of communication. There was a change in supervision there, and there was a reduction in intake of animals. So things changed a little bit, but I think we should give it a year, give it 2 years with this MOU, and let's see if we can come up with a good working relationship. And if the friends say, hey, listen, we'd like to try this program or that program, we take it as it comes. But right now, let's commit to the partnership again, which we had for many years, which was actually somewhat informal. I don't think there was ever an MOU. Anyone please correct me, but I don't ever remember an MOU. So I say we have the chief do the baseline. We report back in 3 to 6 months to the council. This is the MOU we have, and it's going to be a very, very basic MOU, but at least it is something, Councilwoman Perella. We've reestablished our relationship with the friends, and this is what we're looking at. And I don't know exactly how far the MOU will go. I don't know yet. But we will report back in 3 to 6 months with it. And then once that relationship's established, things are running along. If they want to start a program, that's fine. But the town is going to be a part of that negotiation initially before it's presented to the council. That's my recommendation, to come back 3 to 6 months with an MOU.
So personally, I think that's a great next step. I think that is a reasonable next step, and then it allows the friends and the town to have discussions before it comes in front of the council again. And maybe what's proposed in front of the council is mutually agreed upon already, which would be wonderful next steps. So if unless the council has other thoughts or ideas, I think what the administrator just proposed in response to Mary's question seems reasonable and appropriate. Is there any objection to that?
Should we do that as a motion?
I don't see why we can't. It's a next step. The way the workshop was advertised for this evening, that would be appropriate. So Mary, I'll take that as a motion.
Yeah, I would not go to 6 months though. I would do like 3 or 4 months, because we already have a draft, like a working draft as a starting point. So I don't think it should take 6 months to do that. I thought you were going to say 3 to 6 weeks, but I think maybe
The budget.
Excuse me, with the budget, yeah, we've got a lot going on in the next couple of months ourselves, but I think 3 to 4 months at the most, like by what is this? By the middle of June meeting or the early July meeting, we should have this done and agreed to by everyone that comes to us for our approval. And that should be it. And I do think it would be good if everybody can work it out before it comes back to us. So that's my motion, but not 6 months. By July.
I'll
By
second
July.
that.
Okay, so motion made by Mary to act on the suggestion of the administrator with a timeline no later than resolved in July, seconded by Tony. Discussion? Hearing none. Mary?
Aye.
Tony?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion carries. So excellent. Outstanding. Thank you all. This was well said by all, that it was a very healthy discussion, and we'll move towards next steps of making a better end here. So again, thank you all for the efforts and energies that you all put in thus far. I know that there's a lot more coming, and that's a good thing. So just need a motion to adjourn from the council, please.
So move.
Wasn't there another number 3
one
on
more.
here?
Yeah.
Me.
Administrators.
Thank you for that. So we had a motion and a second. We've all voted on it. So Madam Clerk, thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, the last item on the agenda is the executive order provided by the town administrator Contenti for the 16th renewed declaration of the state of emergency. And this is presented to the council for consent. And this is an extension through April 14th, 2021.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we had a motion. Hold 1 second. Is there a second?
I can second it.
See a second. Okay, so motion made by Tony, seconded by Mary to approve the executive order extension through April 14th. Mr. Administrator, is there anything you wanted to add on this? No, okay. Any discussion from the council? Hearing none. Mary?
Aye.
Tony?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
I'd also vote aye. Motion carries. Now I'm looking for that adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there
Second.
a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good night, everyone, and
Thank
thank you.
you all.
Good night, all. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.